I'm Jon, founder and CEO of Ecom AI, as Matt said, former resident of Salt Lake City. Love it out here. We're investing in this community, both from a people standpoint and a physical space standpoint. We hope to open a new office out here in the next quarter. So love being out here and having opportunities to be able to interface and be with so many other cool companies in a forum like this. I think we get a lot of value, and hopefully you do too. So as Matt said, we'll talk about sort of this new search economy. There's certainly a lot to talk about. We've got 46 slides to go through in the next hour and a half. And so if anybody needs a restroom break, just feel free to get up and do it. 26 slides in the next 25 minutes. I was kidding. So let's... I don't have enough content or words for 90 minutes. So I think it's important to sort of level set on kind of what's driving things around the new search. And ultimately, it always comes back to data. I think it's telling when you have some of the largest companies in the world that are investing heavily in what their data is, how their data flows, how it's structured. And we'll kind of get into this a little bit and ultimately what the tea leaves at the top mean for us, outside of sort of this Wall Street momentum that we're seeing. So anyone in e-commerce has probably been hit over the head several times with sort of this alphabet of AI search, whether it's SEO, GEO, AEO, ACP, and so on and so forth. We call them TLAs, which are three-letter acronyms. And this is probably not a comprehensive list. I'm sure we'll see a lot more in the coming months. But ultimately, where we like to start and where our customers, come to Ecom AI for is this block down at the bottom. Structured and contextual product data is really the foundation that's going to power and drive everything. There's certainly a lot of hacks that are being employed to try to capture, AI search and things like that. But ultimately, what it comes down to is how is your product data structured, and how much context can you feed algorithms, either Google or Claude, OpenAI, you name it. So we'll kind of go through this and hopefully, and if anybody wants a copy of this afterwards, there's going to be a lot of information. Let me know. I'm happy to send it out. So obviously the economy, AI search economy is going to be, it's going to be massive, and it's already showing signs of making significant leaps from really the tail end of 2024 now in the first half of 2026. Everybody hears, AI search like it's sort of this hurricane that's off in the distance, but we still have time before it makes landfall. It's starting to rain very heavily, and the winds are picking up. To me, the one number that jumps out is the 400% year-over-year growth. Whether you are, building your own brand or building a software company, typically you start to see 200, 300, 400% growth in year-over-year. That's you're starting to hammer the early stages of a J curve. And so these are really good signs for us. Obviously, the 20.9 billion in AI commerce that's projected for this year is going to grow at a compound rate of significant proportions over the next 5. So just to kind of level set, it's here, and it's only going to get bigger. So what does that mean for brands, right? And historically, we've been selling to consumers, to people. And so within sort of our sphere, this is now sort of the human layer where buyers still make decisions. Narratives can drive conversions, and emotion and confidence can help close. This is where brand voice matters. This is where the copywriting matters. This is where the approved content in your product catalog matters. But now we've entered this sort of secondary pathway that we're all going to ultimately be responsible for selling through, which is the machine layer. These are your AI agents. These are algorithms that are effectively touching this product data before it surfaces it to anyone. And ultimately, it's the new gatekeeper to visibility. We have the benefit of going to a lot of conferences and observing and seeing kind of what's out there. And this whole notion of discoverability is still big, and it's it's common vernacular that's being used. We need to be discoverable, we need to be findable. But really, when you start thinking and looking from a systems standpoint at the machine layer, you can't be discoverable until you're first retrievable. If you think of the internet as a giant database, you have to be able to make contextual matches, and you first have to be retrieved before you can be discovered. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So ultimately, it's like, okay, great. As if, selling and search and e-commerce wasn't difficult enough, we've introduced this new layer, this new sales channel. How do we have, content that's hard enough to keep up with right now? How do we have it, sort of split and serve both channels? And ultimately, the answer is it's a lot easier than you think. And so we're going to keep coming back to this notion of enriched product data sitting at the foundation that's going to serve both of these channels. And so what does the word enriched mean in enriched product data? So enriched is serving the algorithm, structured attributes that AI can parse, semantic markup, and validated specs. So we start talking about the existing content in your catalog right now is approved, it's good, it's been there, it's serving the human layer. But how do we take that and start appealing to the machine layer? And that's catalog depth. So instead of content crawl, you don't need more content. What you need is more context. That's what the machines want. And so how do you pull context out of what you have from a content standpoint right now? That's where the real magic happens when we start talking about a foundation of enriched product data. So we had the benefit of being at NRF last week. I'm curious if anybody in the room was at NRF in New York. So 40,000 people at the Javits Center. It's a really well-run conference, but you can kind of get some ideas on where people are focusing for the year. And so for us, what NRF really revealed to us was data quality. And the new question is shifting from, do you have AI, to can your data power and help AI serve you and your brand? And that was a really interesting one for us, because even 2 to 3 years ago, we were all like, well, we need AI. We just didn't know what AI was. We just all thought we needed it. But inevitably, AI and what it means right now, and what we're seeing from a near-term success standpoint, brands are leveraging their data to make AI work for them, to make algorithms work for them. And so that was a very common theme that we saw. And obviously you can't be in New York without, drawing some parallels over to Wall Street. And can you go to the next one, Matt? Sorry. What we like to do is we like to look and see, okay, number one, what are the largest publicly traded retailers doing? Like, how are they investing in product data? What are they doing with their catalogs? And then on the tail end of that, what are the analysts and what are the investment banks saying about how they're doing and how well they're doing? So a couple of big things that we saw last week. Analysts are now factoring AI readiness of product data into retail valuations. So what does that mean for small, non-publicly traded catalogs? This means that Wall Street is now seeing the AI readiness of product data as a critical KPI for an overall enterprise value of a large publicly traded retailer for the very first time. Catalog depth is a competitive moat now. So Morgan Stanley, retailers with structured and rich catalogs command premium valuations versus peers. And again, the question changed from, do you have AI tools, to can your data actually power AI? We may not answer to Wall Street, but our customers and algorithms are demanding a lot of the same things. So for us, it's like, okay, let's look at the big picture. What are the major players doing? What's Wall Street sort of pinning on retailers? What are their expectations? And you start to do pattern recognition and see the same themes over and over and over again. So we'll look at really quickly at three of what the largest retailers are doing in the space. So Walmart, Nike, and Bosch. So if many of you don't know, Walmart in 2025 announced within 6 months they enriched and optimized 850 million data points in their catalog. And so you start looking at, well, why is Walmart doing that? Significant top line driver, significant OpEx driver, but they internally had a massive team, and I don't want to do the case study any injustice, but a 6-month sprint, almost 1 billion data points inside their catalog. Bosch, a similar story, created 300 million digital twins of their product representations. And then Nike, as we'll see, has experienced 100 times efficiency gain. Nike's an interesting story. They basically restructured their entire catalog, restructured their entire omni-channel approach, and at the very core of that was their catalog and their data. So Nike obviously went all in on intent-based discovery. It drives 40% of their app discovery now. Walmart executed an outstanding AI foundation that at the very core of that is their enriched catalog. Bosch experienced massive OpEx gains across a number of different products. And again, the pattern is that they're not buying tools, they're investing in infrastructure. And when you kind of zoom out from that, it's like, all right, well, what is infrastructure? Because we're all accustomed to buying tools and using tools. So the infrastructure really comes at a significant sort of economic unlock. We know through a lot of research, and depending upon which publication it is, sometimes up to 25% of revenue leakage is due to poor catalog data. Okay, we know that. 54% of returns are preventable with incomplete product info. Okay, that's good data from Akeneo. 200 to 300% better conversion. That the Syndigo research was really impactful because they had probably the most structured, what I would call as close to a clinical trial as you could have in e-commerce. But the reality is better product data converts at a much stronger level. Product returns are fewer and preventable, and being able to capture the revenue leak that's occurring right now. So ultimately for us and our company is we want to look at where the market's going in whole, and then we want to be able to take sort of this Wall Street approach to retail and to commerce in general and apply it in a Main Street fashion, because not everyone has the capabilities and the resources and the time to do a 6-month sprint to augment 1 billion pieces of product data. Not many of us have 1 billion products or 1 billion pieces of data to begin with. So for us, the opportunity was a few years ago to start building core infrastructure around where we saw search ultimately going, which is going to be driven by that machine layer, but still relying on the basis of the human layer, the consumer layer. And so ultimately, it's not a resources constraint anymore. It's timing. We love this, and I think most of the other AI companies here would agree that language models have collapsed a cost curve. To be able to deliver and execute on millions of pieces of product data now is extremely scalable. So compute cost, very positive. And ultimately, cloud native platforms eliminate sort of the need to build versus buy. We work with a lot of brands, and we see a lot of teams internally want to take on certain AI initiatives. And for us, it's always interesting what actually succeeds, what makes it to pilot, and then ultimately what gets killed. What we're seeing, though, from our standpoint as sort of a vendor in this marketplace, is there's so many options, and there's so many really good options for achieving a lot of things when it comes to being able to sell in the market and e-commerce in general. So, it's not an us like an e-com. We're doing great. It's everybody, but it's facilitated by sort of the broader technology at large. So if we look at like the evolution of product enrichments, the copywriter era where we had people inside of field level data sets, keyword stuffing, trying to augment data, looking at SEMrush, looking at semantic keyword movement. And then we kind of went into these first two sort of blended together, sort of the AI wrapper phase where, Jasper and Writerly and some of the others said, hey, we can actually create content a lot faster. It doesn't scale, it doesn't integrate with your catalog, and it doesn't have a lot of semantic logic embedded. But if you need product descriptions, like we can churn that out really quickly. And then we kind of quickly moved this, the AI wrapper phase from 2022 to really 2025, 2026 into sort of this infrastructure phase where you're combining both of the, the elements, the strongest elements of both of those. You've got AI search, optimizations, and enrichment that have core logic embedded that are pulling in data signals for what semantically buyers are looking for. Then you're being able to use language models in a way to drive contextual depth inside the catalog, to not create content sprawl, but to give more clues, to surface more buyers, to surface more visibility for your products. So how does AI decide what to surface? This is where it gets super interesting. So what we're asking, ChatGPT to do here is, from this statement of I need running shoes for a marathon in the rain, to pull out some really key pieces of data from that statement that, we all sort of in natural language said. What's the use case? What's the weather? What's the cushioning? What's the terrain? What's the distance? And historically, our product data misses this. And so in the era of AI search, if the data, if this contextual data is missing, it's going to get skipped. It just won't be surfaced because the model has nothing to go on. And so when we talk about this word enriched, being able to embed all of these different attributes, contextual attributes of the product that give the intent parsing a higher degree of sort of connective tissue, of surfacing to the buyer options of products that sort of best match what they're looking for, that's what gets seeded. So it's at the foundation level, this is really cool. And it's a wildly different era of search that we're in versus what we just came out of. So context, we hear that word. What does context mean? So again, in the case of a blue running shoe, that's a great shoe for running. And we see so many product descriptions and catalogs that sometimes even have fewer words than that. But this is very common, right? This is what we all sort of wrote for and built for, up until a few years ago. The technical requirements now inside the catalog are vast. The good thing is to be able to populate all of this is really a function of finding the right partner. Don't feel like you have to be able to do all of this at scale inside your catalog alone. This is something that we've been working on for the last probably 3.5 to 4 years. There's some others in the marketplace that are too, because this has to be solved for. If we're going to sell products in an active, dynamic marketplace, contextual depth is a prerequisite. It's not a nice to have anymore, it's a need to have. So on the basis of context, you have to have structure that matters too. Algorithms love structured data. It's predictable, it creates certainty, and it facilitates a better match between semantic query and what the consumer is looking for. And so what we understand that a lot of companies, their algorithms are black boxes, and for good reason. But what we do know, and what Google and OpenAI and others do a really fantastic job of telling us, is how they want their data structured. So we don't have to guess at this. We know that out of compliance character counts, missing or incomplete attributes, things like that, there's a punitive element. If you don't contain that inside your product data within the catalog at scale, the products get suppressed, because algorithms want enriched, structured data where they have the context from a 95% confidence perspective that this product is going to meet the needs of that particular semantic query. So you have context and you have structure, both of which, in my opinion, I think the structure is far easier to solve for. We know exactly what structure the algorithms want your data in. So getting that in the right structure, easy enough. The context is a lot more of a fun challenge. and requires a lot of sort of dynamic training of our models, understanding what the market's doing, what consumer trends are driving different things, and then being able in real time to add that contextual depth to the catalog. So obviously a lot going on here. So, size isn't the end all be all. Historically, more products, more content, more budget, bigger was better. That was the game that we were playing. And right now it's clearly, we're entering an era where it's quality over quantity, and intelligent catalogs are seeing significant advantages. So we spend a lot of time with enterprise brands. We work with a lot of very large catalogs, and we see the same things: legacy systems, technical debt, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of SKUs, and organizational inertia, right? We don't want to touch the machine because the machine's kind of running pretty well right now, and we're just going to let it be. You have a lot of siloed teams, and obviously change management, it's big. Where we see the biggest wins in working with smaller catalogs and emerging brands is in speed. You've got typically less data that's housed either in a Shopify or sort of a newer PIM. There's no legacy, ugly databases that have been stitched together over the past 2 decades. There's an opportunity to move quickly. There's an opportunity to unify not only the team, but the catalog data from top to bottom. And now the playing field's been level. You're not competing on volume, on data volume. You're competing on data quality, which is a really important distinction as we enter 2026 and beyond. So we see this all the time. We see 500 SKU catalogs that compete with large enterprise giants that run circles around them. They've invested in their data. They keep it fresh. They keep it enriched. They understand the importance of context and structure, and they win. This is not anything that's technically complex to integrate, at least from our perspective. We're completely API led, and so implementation and integration, very fast. Catalogs can be 100% optimized in weeks. And AI search doesn't count SKUs. It's really calculating the relevance and the depth of your catalog and keeping a record, and obviously the amplification that occurs when it says, hey, brand X has really strong catalog depth, a lot of context for me, reviews are strong, all the things come together from a connective tissue standpoint, and the amplification that occurs from there can be astounding. We've seen some unbelievable gains. So it doesn't. I think one of the best questions that we get is like, well, how do you measure ROI? All right, if we invest in optimizing our product data, it's not its own attribution channel. So how do you quantify it, right? And I think the answer is sort of twofold. You've got an OpEx standpoint where speed and things really go towards the bottom line in terms of a cost saving. But the performative benefit that's carried down the omnichannel is ridiculous. You lower your customer acquisition costs. Right now with poor product data, if you're paying to boost ads that don't have a good, strong data foundation, you're going to pay more for those ads to reach the people that you intend them to. The algorithm's having to guess, and it's just going to cost you more money. We see it in email and SMS drivers, more enriched data that's being delivered via Klaviyo or MailChimp or whomever is doing your email SMS. Paid media, better feed quality, higher return. And then obviously marketplace syndication, having a unified catalog that there's no guesswork, there's no subjective determinations being made on, I think this keyword, might make a difference, or, we need to add another sentence about, a seasonal attribute that this product may have. It's speed, it's accuracy, and it's data driven. So from our perspective, we see this window and it's moving very quickly. We see kind of the next 18 months is really important. You've got 73% of enterprise catalogs right now have commerce initiatives underway. And ultimately, what is a late entry cost going to be? Again, how do you quantify not being able to surface your products as you have an AI search market that's growing, but products that aren't playing in that marketplace. So it's real, it's happening, and it's really important, and especially for the non-enterprise brands that lean into this early. The results are astounding. They are. We're happy to talk after about some of the things that we're seeing. So obviously the path forward. Look, we're getting inundated with tools. You know, I get solicited 150 times a day for someone that's got a new tool that does something. We've got tool fatigue. We have AI fatigue. We have, SEO, GEO, AEO fatigue. What's going to matter? And ultimately, it's infrastructure that's going to carry you over the next decade. And so, what does winning look like? It's complete attributes, no gaps. Contextual data structure for how customers actually search. Your data is activated. Right now, most data is just stored. There's no activity to it. There's no logic to it. It just exists. And the opportunities to make it work for you 24/7, 365 are abundant. And then obviously, governed. Brands get really funny when you say, hey, we're going to read, write, and publish to your catalog on your behalf. That can be an interesting conversation. What we see is, from a governance standpoint, once you start understanding what's being, added to your catalog, the benefit and the result from that, ultimately we see a world where no one touches their catalogs manually ever again. And I think we're going to get there faster than we initially thought. There's no reason for people to be inside of CMS or PIM fields trying to optimize subjectively optimize pieces of data. It's typically not the highest and best use of people's time. And those efforts are probably better spent on strategy and other things. So, what we see is, from at least our customer base and extrapolate it out into the market, I think we're within the next 60 months where all of this is completely automated for everyone. And it's exciting for us to sort of be on the forefront of leading that change. So to kind of close it, brands that treat their product data as infrastructure and not content are going to win. This isn't a content play. This is about contextual structured data that's going to yield lower customer acquisition cost. It's going to yield significantly higher conversions and more revenue and the opportunity to compete on a more level playing field going forward. I think that's it. Thank you.